All right, so are you ready to dive into the world of EV charging today?
Always ready.
Specifically, we're looking at ChargePoint and their financials. You sent over this Motley Fool piece, December 3rd, 2024. Why ChargePoint won't turn a profit for years to come. Quite a title.
Yeah, it's a little provocative, isn't it?
Yeah, and it gets at something that I think is really interesting, though. It's not just about ChargePoint, but sort of like a lot of companies that are at the forefront of these huge technological revolutions. How do you balance, innovating and creating groundbreaking technology with actually, making money and keeping the lights on?
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? It's like this balancing act between, pushing boundaries and staying afloat.
So maybe for some of our listeners who haven't been like glued to EV news, let's back up for a second, just set the stage a little bit. What exactly does ChargePoint do in this whole EV world?
Okay, so basically, they're the ones making the charging stations that you see popping up everywhere, and they also provide the software that manages all those chargers. The behind-the-scenes stuff that makes sure your EV actually gets the juice it needs.
So like the unsung heroes of the EV revolution?
Yeah, kind of like that. The article actually uses this great analogy. They compared ChargePoint to the picks and shovels of the gold rush. So not the miners themselves, but the ones providing the essential tools for everyone else.
I like that.
Yeah.
So while Tesla's, making headlines with their Cybertruck and everything, ChargePoint's quietly building the infrastructure that all EVs need, regardless of brand.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting because, their top 25 customers in Q1 2023, they were spending 16 times more than they were back in Q1 2017.
That's incredible growth.
It is. And think about this. EV adoption is still under 10% here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's still early days.
Right. So there's a ton of room for that market to grow even more.
It's a lot of runway for ChargePoint.
Huge. And the cool thing is that they're not just focusing on one type of charging either. They're offering solutions for homes, for businesses, for fleets, for everything in between.
Yeah, I've seen them everywhere.
Exactly. So they're well positioned to, benefit from the diverse needs of the EV market as it expands.
Smart. Okay, so it seems like everything's coming up roses for ChargePoint, but the article we're talking about today hints at a catch, and this is what makes it really fascinating. ChargePoint is pouring a ton of money into R&D, into research and development. So they're not content with just making charging stations. They want to be at the cutting edge of charging technology.
Which is great in theory, but it comes at a cost.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty here. What's this R&D focus doing to their bottom line?
Okay, so in Q2 of fiscal year 2025, they pulled in a gross profit of $25.6 million, which, sounds pretty good on the surface.
Right.
But then you look at their expenses, sales, marketing, administrative costs, that was already $51.8 million.
So more than double their profit already.
Yeah. And then comes the R&D spending for that same quarter, a whopping $36.5 million.
Wow, more than their gross profit.
Yeah, so they're spending more on pushing the boundaries of charging tech than they're actually making from their products.
Okay, that's a bold move.
It is, and it really raises the question, are they being reckless? Or are they visionaries who are playing the long game while everyone else is just focused on the short term?
I think that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And to answer it, we need to dig a little deeper into what exactly they're investing in and why. So let's unpack that. What kind of R&D are we talking about here? Because innovation can sound really cool, but it's also kind of vague.
Yeah, it is a bit of a buzzword. But in ChargePoint's case, it's actually pretty substantial. It's not just about making the chargers faster or smaller or whatever. They're looking at some pretty futuristic stuff, like vehicle-to-grid technology or V2G.
Okay, I've heard of that, but how does it work?
Basically, it lets EVs send power back to the grid when it's needed.
Whoa, so like during peak hours or something.
Exactly. Your car basically turns into a little mini power plant, helping to stabilize the grid.
That sounds amazing. But is that even, close to being a reality?
It's closer than you might think, and that's just one example. They're also working on something called dynamic load management, which basically helps prevent the grid from getting overloaded by, intelligently distributing charging across multiple vehicles.
So like a traffic controller for electrons?
Yeah, exactly. Making sure everyone gets charged up without causing a blackout.
I see. So they're not just thinking about making chargers.
Nope.
They're thinking about how those chargers fit into the bigger picture, like the whole energy grid.
Exactly. They're trying to anticipate the challenges of a future where EVs are everywhere.
And where everyone needs to charge them at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay, so it seems like they have a pretty long-term vision.
They do, which is impressive.
Yeah.
But it also leads us to another important point, the competitive landscape.
Ah, right. Because ChargePoint isn't playing in a vacuum.
No, not at all. The EV charging space is getting crowded, and there are a lot of players with big ambitions.
So it's not just their financials they have to worry about, it's also the competition.
Exactly. It's like a Formula E race. Everyone's vying for the lead. You've got companies like EVgo, Shell Recharge, all building out their charging networks. And then, of course, there's Tesla.
Yeah, with their supercharger network.
Right. They're already pretty ubiquitous.
So how can ChargePoint compete with a giant like Tesla?
Well, their strategy is interesting. They're kind of positioning themselves as the Switzerland of EV charging.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
They're focusing on being compatible with all types of EVs, not just Teslas.
Ah, so they're more open.
Exactly. They're also putting a big emphasis on software and services, building a platform that can manage entire charging ecosystems for businesses and cities.
So it's less about individual charging stations and more about the brains behind the operation.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Tesla wants to control the whole experience, from the car to the charger. ChargePoint wants to be the go-to platform for everyone else, providing the software and expertise to manage the complexities of large-scale EV charging.
That's a smart strategy, but it still seems like they're walking a tightrope financially, right?
Oh, absolutely. Their success really hinges on a few key things. First, the EV market needs to keep growing rapidly. If EV adoption stalls, ChargePoint's plans could be in trouble.
Yeah, that makes sense. No EVs, no need for chargers.
Exactly. Second, they need to secure funding for their R&D. This level of investment isn't sustainable forever. They need investors who believe in their long-term vision.
Deep pockets and a lot of faith.
You got it. And then there's the wild card, government regulations.
Ah, yes. The unpredictable hand of government.
Exactly. The EV market is heavily influenced by policy decisions, tax credits, emission standards, all of that. A sudden shift in those policies could really impact ChargePoint's growth, either positively or negatively.
So even if ChargePoint does everything right, they could still get tripped up by factors outside their control.
That's the reality of operating in such a dynamic and emerging market.
I guess that's what makes this such an interesting deep dive. Because ChargePoint's story really captures all the challenges and opportunities of investing in these new technologies.
It's high stakes, uncertain, and potentially transformative.
Which brings us back to the question we started with. Are they being reckless? Or are they visionaries playing the long game?
Right. And ultimately, that's for each investor to decide.
Okay, so after all this, what's the verdict? Is ChargePoint a stock you'd recommend? So should our listeners be rushing out to buy ChargePoint stock right now?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for as an investor. If you're seeking quick returns, this might not be the right play for you. ChargePoint's making it clear that they're prioritizing long-term innovation, even if it means sacrificing profits in the short term.
It's like they're building the rocket while it's still on the launch pad, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But that's also what makes them so interesting. They're betting big on this future where EVs are everywhere, and their technology is essential. If that bet pays off, the rewards could be huge.
But of course, there's also the risk that it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So for someone who is interested in ChargePoint, what should they be watching for? What are the make or break factors here?
Okay, so a few things to keep an eye on. First, EV adoption rates. That's the foundation of their whole business model. If those numbers stall out, it doesn't matter how good their tech is. The demand just won't be there.
Right. Makes sense.
Second, their partnerships. Are they making deals with major automakers, with fleet operators, with cities? That's key for actually getting their technology deployed on a large scale.
So it's not enough to just have cool tech in the lab.
Nope. They need to show that they can actually translate that into real-world adoption.
And then, of course, there's the R&D side.
Right. If they can deliver on some of those more futuristic technologies, like the vehicle-to-grid stuff we were talking about, that could really give them a competitive edge.
So ChargePoint's success is tied to a lot of factors, not just their own performance, but also the broader EV market and their ability to, play nice with others.
Exactly. It's a complex picture, and there's a lot of uncertainty.
But what I find interesting is that even if ChargePoint as a company doesn't end up winning, their work could still have a huge impact on the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. All the research and development they're doing, even if it doesn't directly translate into profits for them, it could pave the way for the entire EV charging sector to advance. They're pushing boundaries, and that benefits everyone in the long run.
So investing in ChargePoint is kind of like investing in the future of EVs as a whole.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's not just a financial decision. It's a statement about what kind of future you believe in.
Well said. So For our listeners who are intrigued by ChargePoint, we definitely encourage you to do your own research, weigh the risks and the rewards, and then decide if this is a company that aligns with your own investment goals. It's a gamble, for sure, but it's a gamble on a technology that could potentially change the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. It's about the intersection of technology, innovation, and the future we're all building together.
It's been a great journey into the world of EV charging, and we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. As always, stay curious, keep exploring, and until next time, keep those minds charged up.